Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Talking Real Estate with Champions Real Estate Team here at Berkshire Hathaway Home Service Ambassador Real Estate Company. My name is Mark Wehner II, team leader here. Joining me today is Russ Williams with Williams Mortgage. We talk about real estate every Wednesday, what's gone on the last 7 days, what we're seeing kind of nationally, locally, all that good stuff. We like to start out with a quick tip. Quick tip today is just getting a game plan together. So this time of year, I've had a couple of people reach out already, just kind of, hey, we're thinking about buying a house, maybe in the next 6 months or, that kind of where are we at? What are the steps? Those type of things. So it's a great opportunity, now to get those ducks in a row. And anytime is a great time to get your ducks in a row. And just get a good game plan. I do a lot of sports analogies, and you kind of got to get in the spring training mode of like, all right, what do we need to do in the regular season? What are the plays we're going to run? What's the defenses that we're going to go against? I.e., buyers or sellers, depending on what side of the coin you're on. And that's what we talk about is just knowing what the other team is doing, what you need to do to get your playbook in order, and then know what the plays you're going to run. Because you may meet with the lender. Oh yeah, you can do an FHA. That's all you're going to do. Well, what other options are out there? Can you get into a conventional? Can you do different types of programmings, grants, those type of things that you may be able to get into that are on the other page of the playbook that maybe a lender may not know their page of the playbook, and that's why working with people that are reputable, trustworthy, and things of that sort that can really help you put the plays in the playbook and teach you how to run them. And I think that's the most important thing. You may have this playbook, but if you don't know how to run the plays, it's tough, because then you don't feel comfortable with it. It's, if you walk out on the field and you're like, this playbook and that other team over there knows what they're doing, and we're going to get, punched in the mouth if we try to run this play. But if you know the strategy behind it, whether that's negotiations, how to search for home, what get your dollar for lending, all that type of, that's what our job here is with Russ and I is, to get that playbook so you know why you're running, what you're running, and what play you're doing. And I think that's the easiest way that we can kind of spell it out. And that's the fun thing. Like I said, some of you may know me from other things, but I coached hockey for 15 years. So I enjoy coaching. I enjoyed that mentality and coaching of players. I was coaching high school kids and things like that. So it's like in seeing all of a sudden when the light bulb clicks on, like, oh, that's why coach is telling us, and this is the play that we're supposed to run, and here's why we're doing it, and to combat, so the same thing when you're working with buyers and sellers, it's like, oh, that's why we should do it this way, and and then we have this other option. Should we try that? So those different things like that, and it's not every buyer is one size fits all. Sellers are one size fits all, and that's the thing I love about this business, is that you have people are the variable and their situations and in 17 years, and Russ has been in it longer on the mortgage side, but we've seen a lot of different things and we can pull different plays from other people's playbook and say, hey, I had this client the one time they had to do this or this has worked out for them. And you have that experience behind you and you have a coach in the press box that's seen the field play. So I think that's the biggest thing, this time of year when people want to gear up for the spring and, that's when the home buying season, well, home buying season is right now. We have a listing right now that we just reduced the price down to 285. Fantastic house in El Dorado, just over 1,700 square feet. But the activity in that is there's not a lot of buyers right now, and so that's an opportunity that someone that's thinking about buying a home, if you got your ducks in a row, there's opportunities out there to be had to find a great house at a great price. And sellers are they're not going to give the house away by any means, but it's a fair price for the house. You may not have three offers, two offers on the house that may drive that price up when in the summer potentially you may have that. So that's kind of our quick tip is more just a game plan and sitting down with one of us here at Champions Real Estate Team. We love the opportunity just to get to know you, figure out what's in your playbook and how we can and relate that to you. So and in part of that playbook, you got to know the market. So that's what we talk about here all the time. I talk about the real estate side, Russ talks about the mortgage side. So we'll jump right into it. So obviously, I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving weekend. So our numbers a little sluggish, from that turkey dinner aspect of it, but it's very typical. So we had 345 new listings go live, 222 new contracts written over the last 7 days, and 311 homes that happy new homeowners they got in right before the holiday or closed this week. But that's down from 200 houses from the previous week, which typical for a holiday weekend. So no surprise in that regards. 30,000 foot view. Obviously, those numbers reflect kind of similar. Not as big of a drop as what we had the previous one. So we only were down about 100 homes overall in the active market on that 45-25 or 41-25. Sorry, active listing on my Lincoln MLS. Douglas County is at 2288. for Douglas Harper County active listings. Existing homes, I mean, basically not the new construction houses. Out of that number is 1288, and we have it exactly, I forgot a comma in there, 1,000 houses on the new construction side of it. So months of inventory is ticking up a little bit, in that regards at 4.8. So that's essentially a neutral market. It's not a buyer's market, not a seller's market. It's a healthy market. In that regards, our average sold price at 361. So, market's still moving along. It's very typical this time of year. Obviously snow, slowed down some people probably too, getting out there and looking at houses this last weekend. But this, if a seller wants to, or if a buyer wants to see your house in the middle of a blizzard, try to accommodate it, because that buyer is probably pretty serious about buying your home. Some sellers are like, oh gosh, we gotta get out there. I'm like, yeah, maybe just go drive around the block, and let that buyer come into your house and things like that. So if they're looking in the middle of a snowstorm or pouring down rain or stuff like that, they're obviously, moderately serious out there. So I guess, Russ, how are we doing on your end? I don't know if we had too much data come out over the weekend, but I guess what are you seeing, or what are your thoughts on the mortgage side?
Other than being really cold, we have a lot of data coming out, which is heating the market up a little bit here. Certainly coming off of the government shutdown, there are a lot of reports that were either delayed or canceled. And a lot of those reports will be coming out now before Christmas. In fact, just this morning, the ADP employment report, ADP is a payroll company, came out and showed that in November, they were calculating 32,000 jobs lost. And ADP tracks 10 different sectors of the economy, and 6 of those sectors showed losses. What that means is that in the absence of other government data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it increases the likelihood the Fed is going to drop rates at their next meeting. Those are short-term rates, of course. Up until the last couple of weeks, we didn't know what the Fed was going to do. More than half of the Fed voting Fed members were leaning towards not dropping rates at the next meeting, and now that number has jumped to about 90% of those think that we will see a Fed rate cut to the short-term rates, things like credit cards, student loans, auto loans. Keep in mind, Mark, we've talked about this a lot of times. The last 5 times that the Fed has dropped short-term rates, we've seen mortgages tick up a little bit. We expect that could happen again. In the meantime, rates are still very good, and we anticipate that if this economic data continues to be weak, that we could continue to see rates, even though they might tick up initially. The trend is that they'll continue to improve. There's no guarantee of that. We've had this dog and pony show many times. Having said that, though, you're exactly right. Buy the house at today's price. If rates do drop as we head into 2026, which is possible, NAR and others anticipate or forecast that could pull as many as 5 million more people off of the fence and into the home buying market. And that 4.8 months of supply that you have there could go away quickly, and that could start to put upward pressure on home prices. So what is that old saying? The butterfly effect. If a butterfly flaps its wings on the other side of the earth, it affects us here. Well, what the Fed does next week and what they say could have long-term implications on the housing market. So be ready, have a game plan, get in touch with Mark and his team. You'll be glad you did.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we got for today. So if you have any questions, reach out to either one of us. Numbers down here at the bottom, 672-7670 or 290-8936 for us. So happy to sit down, jump on a Zoom, meet you at the office like that. And just like I said, get a game plan, get some information so that you become a more educated, home buyer or a seller in that regard, so that or even on the investing side. So I've seen a lot of decent rentals. Haven't crunched all the numbers and seen all that kind of stuff, what the return on your investment would be. But I've seen a lot of investment properties that have come on the market and things like that have tripped my trigger, and I just haven't pulled the trigger on anything. But so that's what we kind of see this time of year. Sometimes those investors are like, oh, we got to for selling for taxes or whatever. They're kind of getting out and getting rid of some of the houses and stuff like that for whatever reasons in their portfolios and things like that. So that's another option too. If you need to get something off the books before the end of the year, get something on the books before the end of the year. So, but and take care. And if